Can you remember what sparked your interest in anthropology? I can. I was around 8 years old and my mom was watching a special on Pompeii. I asked her what it was and she told me all about it. She told me about what was left of the city and what archaeologists had discovered. I knew then that I was hooked. I mean, in 5th grade, they asked us what we wanted to be when we grew up. Everyone else said things like, NFL player or lawyer or doctor. Yeah, I was that nerd. I found anthropology through archaeology. I had started off as a psychology major in college, then discovered that there was an archaeology track. Well, not really, but they had a few classes that were offered. Pompeii was an ancient city founded in Italy during the Bronze Age, the era referring to 3000 to 1200 BCE. It was founded on the mouth of the river Sarno in the southern part of the Campania region. The climate was just wonderful, and there was rich soil which allowed agricultural activities to flourish, mainly grapes and olives. Life seemed perfect in Pompeii at the foot of this beautiful mountain, Mount Vesuvius. What they didn't know was how angry and vengeful the mountain was. They didn't know that they had settled their lives at the foot of a volcano. The Greeks came to the area in the 8th century BCE, and obviously Greek mythology followed them. There was a legend that told that Hercules fought giants in this area in a fiery landscape. A town near Pompeii had been settled and named Herculaneum after this myth. They too suffered the same fate as Pompeii. After settling Italy for a few hundred years, the Greeks were defeated in battle in 474 BCE at the hands of the Syracusan, those people who lived in Sicily. Following the Syracusan were the Samnites, who came from the mountains and wanted to dominate the region. 343 to 290 BCE brought the Samnite Wars, where the Samnites were fighting amongst themselves. This gave the Romans the chance to swoop in and take influence over the region. Once the Romans found Pompeii, they just fell in love. The town began to flourish in the 2nd century BCE. However, the people in Pompeii were not too fond of the Romans who had come to rule them, since most of them were Samnites. Rome felt the pressure from Pompeii and other areas in Italy who wanted equal rights and wanted to be able to obtain citizenship. This sparked a war between Rome and her allies, therefore naming it the War of the Allies. Rome had a reputation for ruthlessness and brutality in war. Lucius Cornelius Sulla was the general who led the siege against Pompeii. He set up the colony of Venice in 80 BCE following a rebellion, which resulted in the resettlement of 4,000 to 5,000 war veterans. Fortunately, Pompeii was able to recover from the war after Rome conceded defeat, and the city once again was prosperous. A local senate was formed, and a new amphitheater that could seat up to 5,000 people was built. Pompeii covered 3 square kilometers with a population of nearly 12,000 people. A third of those were thought to be slaves. The outer suburbs were very densely populated, with nearly twice as many people living outside the city. Hundreds of farms and 100 villas were in the surrounding countryside. Pompeii was the main trade stop in the Bay of Naples. Surrounding settlements would send their produce to Pompeii to transport around the Roman Empire. Some of the major produce items were olives, wine, oil, wool, salt, figs, almonds, and wheat. Pompeii also served as a port for many imports, such as spices, silk, wild animals for the gladiator arenas, and slaves to man the thriving agricultural industry. The town was surrounded by a wall with many gates. These gates often had 2 or 3 arched entrances to separate pedestrian and cart traffic. The streets were paved and wide inside the gates, but they were not numbered nor named. Traffic was often limited to one direction on many streets. They also had many types of buildings in the city: shops, villas, temples, taverns, exercise grounds, baths, public latrines, schools, basilicas, brothels, theaters. You name it, they had it. On February 5th, 62 CE, a massive earthquake, reading at a 7.5 on the Richter scale, shook Pompeii. You remember that earthquake in Japan in 2011? That measured at a 5. The town and surrounding areas were devastated. Buildings and walls collapsed, and the sheep in the countryside seemed to just drop dead. The aqueducts and underground pipes were damaged, which disrupted the water supply. It's likely that thousands of people were killed. Many people left the area for good, hoping to escape the destruction. The town slowly made repairs, and life was able to return to normal soon after that. The royal visit in 64 CE by Emperor Nero hastened the repairs, and he lifted the ban that had been placed on gladiator games following riots that had taken place in 59 CE. Pompeii was soon a bustling port once again. Seismic activity continued after the devastating earthquake, but nothing was significant. In 79 CE, Pompeii noticed a drastic change in the environment. Fish started floating dead in high numbers in the Sarno River. Their wells and springs were inexplicably drying up, and the plant life on the slopes of Mount Vesuvius were just wilting and dying. While these were odd occurrences, most people in the city brushed it off and decided to just continue life as normal. What we know about this comes from eyewitness Pliny the Younger. His uncle, Pliny the Elder, was a Roman official who was stationed in Pompeii. His nephew had been staying with him. The younger Pliny was on a boat in the river when disaster struck, which ended up sparing his life. On the morning of August 24th, 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius let out a loud bang, with little fire and smoke coming out. While concerning, the people of Pompeii were unsure of what to make of this. Hours later, the entire top of the mountain blew off, releasing a cloud of smoke and pumice particles that rose 27 miles into the sky. The amount of energy required for an explosion this large was nearly 100,000 times stronger than the blast at Hiroshima. Ash rained down over the city. It was light in weight, but it was extremely dense. Everything was quickly covered in centimeters of ash. Panicked, many people sought shelter or tried to run. The devastating earthquake that had struck 17 years prior was an early sign of the eruption. However, the people of Pompeii were obviously unaware that this was a warning of the destruction to come. The sheep that had dropped dead on the mountainside following the quake had died from poisonous gases that had come from the volcano. Late in the afternoon, Vesuvius exploded again. This time, the ash rose even higher, 33 miles into the air. The ash that fell from this explosion was heavier, and now was meters thick on the ground. Buildings were beginning to collapse under the weight of the ash. The people huddled near walls or under stairs to find protection from what seemed like the sky was falling, though it literally was. They hugged loved ones or held on to their most prized possessions. By 11 p.m., the huge cloud collapsed from its own weight and came down over the city in 6 waves of super hot ash. Those who remained were asphyxiated and their bodies were baked, forever frozen in their last moments. Ash continued to fall, and it completely buried the city. The city was soon lost and forgotten. Construction on the Sarno Canal began in 1755, and it uncovered Pompeii. Due to the lack of air and moisture underneath the ash, the city had been preserved. Liquid plaster was used to fill the voids where the bodies had laid, showing every detail of their last moments on Earth. Today, archaeologists use clear resin instead of plaster, since it's more durable material and it won't destroy the bones. Pompeii's discovery also led to more knowledge of the Roman Empire. Bronze statues were unearthed, proving that it was used more commonly in Rome than previously thought. Bad teeth were a common problem with the enamel worn away. Decay and abscesses were also common, most likely due to an overly sweet diet. Diseases such as tuberculosis and malaria were also present. Malnourished slaves were found to still be chained. They had suffered from chronic arthritis and had deformities caused by being overworked. In recent years, a preserved horse was found. It's thought to have been a parade horse because of the iron harness with bronze fittings found near its head. Pliny the Younger's account of Pompeii was written 25 years after the disaster. It's possible his memory was not completely accurate. In 2018, archaeologists found graffiti on a wall dating to October 17th and 79 CE. It's now thought the eruption took place on October 24th, not August 24th. Unfortunately, now tourists have been flooding to the city by the millions, and the Italian officials have had to place certain bans and restrictions on what can be done and seen by tourists. I mean, just recently, someone was in the news for trying to steal mosaics from the ruins. Vesuvius has erupted a few dozen times since it destroyed Pompeii. There was an eruptive cycle beginning in 1631, and the last eruption took place in 1944. It's still an active volcano, and it can erupt at any time.